What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Tom Luongo is a former research chemist and financial political commentator, specializing in the intersection of geopolitics, financial markets, gold, and cryptocurrencies. Publisher of the Gold, Goats, and Guns blog and podcast at tomluongo.me and the monthly Gold, Goats, and Guns newsletter through Patreon at patreon.com/Gold, Goats, and Guns. Tom is a veritable OG in crypto writing, his first article on Bitcoin in July 2010. He is also the editor of Newsmax's Ultimate Wealth Report, as well as a contributor to Financial Intelligence Report newsletters. His work regularly appears on Zerohedge, investing.com, Bitcoin Magazine, and LouRockwell.com. He lives on his hobby farm in North Florida with his family, 5 dogs, a dozen goats, and some ducks. He doesn't jog, but he enjoys even a cheap cigar. Tom Luongo, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
I'm good. The only thing we're missing is a good stiff rye. Other than that, I think you pretty much got it in one. I think we're actually up to 21 goats now. We really need to get rid of them. Well, they double. Like, your herd practically triples every year. So if you're not careful, and it's been a weird year. We haven't actually been able to there's not been a good market with the rise in feed and hay prices. It just hasn't been a good market for goatlings. It's been actually really quite difficult. We're hoping now it's breeding season we can get rid of a few excess goats. If not, well, they're all going to auction, and that's that. So unfortunately, but it is what it is.
Interesting. As someone who just moved to Southwest Florida, I'm interested in getting a hobby farm myself.
Sure.
We've done some shows on regenerative farming and sort of the cattle markets, and
right.
It's really tough, I think, on the hobby farmer to sort of make any money there.
Oh, you don't make money on it.
Right.
Farming is a hobby that you put, hobby farming is truly, you always spend money on your hobby. Your hobby is not generally a profit center. Well, I got news for you. The term hobby farming is completely accurate. Even when, like, I used to run a small dairy and then go to the farmer's market and sell cheese and milk and, yogurt and all the rest of it, we couldn't make any money on it. It was a good tax write-off. We lost money brilliantly as a tax write-off for years. And then eventually after 5 years, the IRS is like, dude, you got to make some money or this isn't a going concern. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm cutting it off.
Right.
So, but other than that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as an accountant, I appreciate the tax side of it. I'm not a tax accountant, but I get that. And I've definitely heard about that and looked into that angle as well. Reason we're getting together tonight is I've become super excited about your work of late.
Okay.
I've come across it. First through Phil Gibson, aka Mr. Sue. He came on the show, episode 116, The Plot to Embarrass America and Destroy the Dollar. We explored a lot of your ideas that were covered even more in depth on your show, 75, 76, 77, those episodes.
Yes.
Which I really hope to explore here today. It's interesting. I do want to know, just maybe if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you have a chemistry background.
Yes.
You're a chemist. And how maybe did you get into markets and economics and libertarian Austrian economics outlook?
Sure. So thank you for the invite and all that. I'm happy to be here tonight. It's great. It's always fun to do this. Had a pretty rough couple of days, so doing one of these is always kind of a good distraction from that stuff. That being said, I got a degree in chemistry from the University of Florida with a minor in English. I've been perpetually 2 classes away from a dual major in chemistry and English, with a focus on British and American literature and poetry, and on top of the chemistry. And then I just spent 25 years as an analytic chemist, working in various environmental labs, attached to research groups, as kind of bumped around the entire North Florida analytics sect. Eventually, I wound up in a research job working on commercializing a novel electrolytic nickel boron. So that was that was an unofficial dual PhD in metallurgy and electrochemistry. Did that until about 2011. But during the entire time, I was kind of, once I got out of commercial laboratory space, I was mostly kind of ensconced around academia. I sort of I ran a lab at the University of Florida for 5 years. And then after that, a couple of other things. Once I was there, I kind of had a little bit of time, to be honest with you. When you're a state employee, you've got all sorts of time to just kind of sit around and like, well, no, furnace is running. Everything's good. Like, I'm done. Like, what else am I going to do? So reading Lou Rockwell, in the early days of Lou Rockwell back in 2000, 2001, it just became, this big education. This, okay, finally figuring out, why is it that I'm so freaking angry with the world? Like, why is it that I hate politics so much? Why is it that nothing makes freaking sense? Right. And that's really what drove this. And I'm that kind of guy. Right. I'm a root cause analysis kind of guy. I mean, when I worked in industry, when I worked in research, when I worked in academia, it was always, I don't care about all these minor things. I care about what's the driving issue. And once I realized that it was monetary policy that drives so much of what we see in the world in terms of politics and everything, the way it shapes society, the way it undermines society and everything, it became like the proverbial light bulb going off in my head. And then it just became an obsession. And it just became one of those moments where I'm like, oh, cool. Like, this is what I want to spend all of my time doing, other than play games, because my career was pretty much get up in the morning, go to work, come home, leave it at work, and not care about it whatsoever. I had no ambitions as a chemist. I had no, upwardly mobile path. If I did, I would have gotten an MBA and then truly run research departments, right? Or taken my last boss's offer up to get a master's, turn it into a PhD while I was working. Now, so I always knew that was kind of not what I wanted to do with my life. But at the same time, I didn't really want to be a markets guy. Like, what I wanted to be was a writer. And I wanted to be a writer since I'm 15. Well, it's fun. It's funny. I don't know. I'm a huge Rush fan. So, and Neil Peart talked about this a lot. The drummer, he talked about how he always wanted to be a writer. And, drumming eventually allowed him the lifestyle to, and he's like, I tried writing bad novels, and I tried this, and I tried that, and they all sucked. And I knew they were all embarrassingly bad. And yes, I've got an embarrassingly bad first novel sitting in a drawer back there. But he wound up being a travel writer. And he was an excellent travel writer because he traveled the world and would keep a notebook. And never in a million years did he ever expect to be a travel writer. Well, never in a million years did I ever expect to be a polemicist. Right. I spent 5 years, studying poetry. I said, literature and art and all this stuff, and, quintessential art fag in college. No, now I turn out to be a political polemicist and, deep thinker on capital markets. But it's the same process. Intellectually speaking, it's all the same process. And once you realize that this is the story you can tell that can move and inspire as many people as possible, that's the point of writing in the first place. So if you can do that, and you can do it well, and interestingly, before you and I started talking tonight, before we started recording, we were talking, kind of a little bit of show prep, and you said you listen to me saw me on Tom Woods the other day. I understand that Tom Woods is one of my freaking heroes, especially within the libertarian community. And the reason is that Tom very, very, very early on, when he came to libertarianism like me in his midlife, but he realized that we had a whole bunch of bad communicators, that Austrian economics, Austro-libertarianism has a bunch of really bad communicators. Since Murray Rothbard died, just don't have anybody that good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Lou Rockwell's writing. I love Ron Paul. I love these guys, and they're good, but there hasn't been that guy that would take up the mantle of what Rothbard did, which was to be multidisciplinary, always write with a smile on his face, but always give you the most unvarnished truth you could imagine. Right. And Rothbard was singular. And so, in some ways, Tom Woods said, yeah, I can do that. Whether he can or he can't is a different story. It's just the idea that he thought he could do it, and then went and built a brilliant communications platform. And so when I say Tom Woods is my hero, I'm literally thinking to myself in terms of Tom's success as a communicator of these very complex ideas, very orthogonal to normie space, these ideas, and do it well. And, prove to everybody that you can build a business off of it, and you can be very successful at it, yada, 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 and build that audience that way. So while my path to that is kind of winding and long and crazy, this is where I find myself today. And I remember when I first had to go independent after my first stint with Newsmax ended in 2017, I'm like, it's put up or shut up time, dude. Do you have the chops or don't you? You've been practicing, for years now. Are you ready to, are you ready to go pro?
Right.
And I didn't have any choice. So yeah, I went pro and took a while, but like everything else, I think if this is that moment where I become the overnight sensation, well, there's 10, 12 years of background work to get to the moment of overnight sensation. So
yeah, and we'll get to, I mean, because I do think your writing's right at the zeitgeist right now. Definitely seems that way to me, and I do think you're a tremendous communicator. I'm curious, going off what you just said there, and there's a lot to unpack. But what kind of games do you like to play?
Oh, dude, I'm a huge board gamer. I've been a board gamer my entire life, and video games and board games. I've been doing games my entire life. I have a regular board gaming group that I meet with down in Gainesville, Florida, every Wednesday, and every third Saturday. Though I didn't get over there yesterday for extenuating circumstances, but we do. I play. You go to Board Game Geek. You go through the first 250 games on the list over at Board Game Geek. I've probably played them, if not owned most of them.
Any favorites?
Yeah. Well, with the exception of like Terraforming Mars and a few others, which I fucking hate for a variety of reasons. Yeah, I've played them all.
What about
I play them with abandon? I love them.
So. What about Stratego or Risk?
Oh, I don't. I graduated out of those.
Okay,
we're not at that. We're far beyond that. We're into these very, very esoteric. I mean, as far as the layman is concerned, these are very esoteric games. And I don't play. And while I understand chess, I play it poorly. It's because I like twiddling bits more than I like that. So, ask me what my favorite game is. I'll tell you it's Brass Birmingham. Have you ever heard of it? No. Is it one of the greatest games ever made? Yes. So 26,000 plus games on Board Game Geek. It's number 3. It's 4 years old. It's a fantastic game. So
awesome. Yeah. My kid's really into video games, and it's great to hear that you're still into video games, because
playing Guild Wars 2 currently.
Yeah. Not familiar with too many anymore myself, but I'm encouraged by how I think important or sort of creative they could be, and sort of game theory and those things.
For me, I'll tell you, just before we move on to that point, what I found is I played a lot of collectible card games. I was there when I was an OG in Magic, for example. Magic first started back in the early 90s. My first pack of cards was unlimited. So no, I did not pull a Library of Alexandria. Comma damn it. I wound up getting one. And then using the shit out of it. And I played in Type 1 tournaments, and I played in the original Magic Pro Tour events and all sorts of stuff like that. And I moved on from Magic because I never really I don't like 2-player games very much. I like political games. And I wound up playing other ones over the course of time, and didn't realize that for years, all this time that I was wasting was actually doing a tremendous education in board state management, and then the ability to read multi-vector and multiplayer incentive structures, and knowing how to attack without weakening too many opponents, and keeping the board managed until there was that moment where I could manipulate and win. And when you do that in a 5-player setting, 4 to 5 nights a week, 6 hours a night for 5 years, you get good at it. You're either really good at it or you're not really good at it. I happen to be really good at it. So, and it's a game that's long dead, and I'm not going to get into the games that I played that they did this with. They're long dead, but the interesting thing is that was an incredible training, and in many ways, so was Magic. This idea that you could manipulate a system by breaking the rules in particularly structured ways, and now you start to see how these assets intersect with these assets, and everything winds up being, I hate to say it, like this massive set of differential equations that just become a solve. And metaphorically speaking, and you're like, oh, okay, that's how this is, that deck's going to beat this deck because of these reasons, and that yada yada yada. And then you really do learn a lot about both balancing strategy and tactics, and then thinking about what your opponent's going to play and what he's going to play next. And and how he's going to act based on very little information. I also love to play poker, but for the same reasons.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I can see how all those skills can help you tease out what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in macroeconomics and geopolitics. So, and I think you're the one who coined the term the Davos crowd.
I think I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost positive that I just wrote it out one day in a random blog post and then just kept using it over and over again until it, became part of the zeitgeist over on Zerohedge. Right. And then, that's where it is. Yeah.
When I think this Davos crowd has been in the sort of vernacular now for at least a year, 2, 3, 4 years, it seems like.
No, they've been working for 150 years in various forms.
But it's really,
but in the last, they've come out from behind the curtain, the proverbial, Wizard of Oz having the curtain pulled back. Oh, by the way, here we are, and now we're going to kill you all.
Right.
And gleefully say so, like the bunch of German eugenicists that they are.
Yeah. And until your work, I never really thought about who the Davos crowd was. Right. And I kind of thought about it as fairly homogenous. Yeah. And aligned and sort of uniform. And so maybe, can you tell me maybe where we've been that maybe just a really high level,
sure,
up until maybe 2008, 2000.
Yeah, it's a
10,
weird thing.
20, something like that.
Well, the interesting part about this is I did a big talk with a small channel recently called Not the BBC, and I think in that one I kind of went through all I kind of led through the last 10 years of history from a particular perspective. But understand that the desire of the various old money interests in Europe and the United States to control the world and to control the flow of global capital, it's as old as our modern history. It's as old as the modern history of banking, going back into the 1700s, 1600s, the late 1600s, the formation of the Bank of England, right? I mean, or even back into Italian city-states during the Renaissance, blah 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 blah, right? I mean, it's we're talking very old money here. That manipulation of currency and manipulation of the value of money through the banking system has always been, has always been kind of the Rosetta Stone for power, and certainly colonial power. Okay. And so the more I think about how to tell this story to a layman audience or a layman plus audience, the various different types of audiences, is everybody can relate to, what's wrong with colonialism. And then you say to yourself, well, do the colonizers, how do they just continually, why does it always seems to be the same people in charge all the time, moving the chess pieces around the board? And why are the same people always getting fucked? I don't know. I hope I can. Yeah. Okay. All right. I test normally I ask first and then drop the F-bombs. This time I'm like, fuck it. So, so when you ask that, when you set up that thought experiment in your head, you're like, okay, well, how do the colonizers keep doing it? Well, they keep doing it through the studious application of what they call monetary policy, which is another word for theft, right? But they just, they're obsessed with euphemisms of trying to, put lipstick on a pig and make them look like the face of the person trying to save the world, which masks the desire to actually rule the world, to crib from Mencken. So once you grok that to the core of your being, you then ask yourself, but at the end of the day that all cartels are metastable. That all attempts in Austro-libertarian theory, economics and free market economics will always tell you that any attempt to control a system, a human system, larger than a two-handed game of poker, is metastable. I've seen it at the board game table. I've seen it at the poker table. I've seen it in a game of Magic, for Christ's sake. In a duel, you can see it when other, especially within a tournament setting, right? You can see these things occurring. And the power dynamics are always metastable because people always react in real time to new information, and there's no way that the central planners can ever know enough in real time and react in real time to make accurate tactical moves to counter. They think they can, which is the problem. And they're usually successful enough with the crude tools that they use in order to get some things done, or at the very least, as they operate in the shadows and then, spring this stuff on us. And we're too busy living our lives to notice that. But this kind of thing is best described almost, now that I think about it, it's almost like they're most effective when you don't notice them. They're most effective when they're not being observed. They're like electrons. They're doing their things as long as they're not being observed. The minute you observe an electron, you know where it is, or you know how fast it's going, but you can't know both because it's quantum mechanics. But once you observe the system, you alter the system. Now, and so once. And so their power dynamic, their ability to manipulate things is only as powerful as it's ever going to be, as long as nobody realizes that they're operating. The minute they start telling everybody they operate, or the minute somebody gets popular enough to explain how they operate, Alex Jones, then they run the risk of being exposed and having their power limited. So information, like everything else, is its own kind of virus. It's its own kind of self-propagating thing, because the truth is cheap and sells itself, while lies are expensive to maintain. And so this is the basic economic dynamic as to why these systems are always metastable and why they fail. And then you lap on top of that the very idea that you have all of these incredibly powerful and egotistical and narcissistic people all in cahoots with one another, until one of them says, yeah, but we're taking you out now. What happens when the cartel starts eating itself? Because, well, there's nothing left to eat from us. They've already taken everything from us. What have they left us with? Soybean oil, high fructose corn syrup, and GMO foods, right? Like, what have they left us with? And $7 a gallon gasoline. Like, great. There ain't no blood left coming from this stone. Okay, so they're going to have to pull from each other, i.e. the debt markets. The debt numbers are so large, there's no more wealth to extract at a rate that's actually at a positive real return for them. Forget us. We've been fucked for 70 years. They can't even pull a positive real return off of this anymore. And because of that, then they start turning on each other to try and take from each other. That's where I believe we are. And what I was trying to communicate in those podcasts you referenced in the beginning, 75, 76, 77 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast, was my attempt to try and create a background of what I think Davos is, what I think some of the other factions are, and how those factions are now no longer necessarily operating with the same goals in mind. They don't all have the same goal structures. Everybody is still trying to win. But we've for so long lived under the rubric of the dominant players at the table, the four of them against the fifth faction, us, were all, they were all working together to stop us from winning, which is always what happens in any 5-player, whatever happens in a game like that. Or just okay, we're going to play Kingmaker, right? It's a political game. You've got 5 people at the table. One guy looks like he's going to win. The other 4 go, okay, well, what do we have to do to stop him from winning? And then it's a game of attrition until somebody finally runs out of it, until someone winds up with just the right amount, the right amount of resources, the right combination of assets to, manipulate the end of the thing, to manipulate events and win the game, and find the firing solution, find the right solve for those differential equations that gets you the win. Well, that's where we are today. And now that they've beaten us down, now they're turned on each other. And now it's a matter of giants are fighting in the clouds, stomping around and beating each other up. And we ants are trying not to get stepped on. And that's conceptually what I think is happening. And now it's messy and it's hard to make it to really, say with certainty, this is what's going on, this is not what's going on. But I've just started to stake out the space. When I went down and started going down this path a year and a half, or little over a year ago, I went, I'm going to test this out in public, and I'm going to let people tell me I'm full of shit. And I'm going to keep looking to see what I think is going on. And what I think is happening, and what I almost know now is happening, the more I listen to Danielle DiMartino Booth talk, the more I realize I know exactly what's going on, which is that, and she has to put it in her terms, which is, as a former Fed official, she can't say what's actually happening. She has to say things like, Jay Powell doesn't want to be doesn't want to be remembered as the second coming of Arthur Burns. That means he's going to raise interest rates. But the question is, why is he raising interest rates? And it's not to tame inflation. It's to get rid of the people who have been trying to take back their colonies. The old colonizers want their colonies back. And every year, every sincere European that I talk to, and I've agglomerated a few of them, either commodity traders or family office managers or whatever. They all are intrigued. They're when they come across my work and they listen to me talk, they go, "Well, he's right." And I didn't realize I was right. And then they really start to go through and they start to pick it apart. And I'm like, yeah, the British crown has always been the United States' worst enemy. The British tabloid media is just really friggin' good at selling Americans that they're our best friends. Fuck that. They're not. The only thing good about England is Monty Python and Top Gear. Or exports from England. Monty Python, and Newcastle Brown Ale. I hate to say it. I'm a big fan of Newcastle Brown Ale. And I give Guinness a pass because it's Irish. And the Irish would appreciate me saying that. The same way that I believe that, good Highland malt came from Scotland. It's not English, therefore. Right? So that's the thing, right? So if you understand that, then you understand that our foreign policy is written by people who are loyal to countries that are not the United States. And they're deeply embedded in the State Department, the DOD, the DOJ, the intelligence services, Congress, the media, all of it. Nothing new. The Brits allied us into 2 world wars on their behalf. Oh, by the way. So, from the day Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown, the Brits have been trying to figure out how to get their colonies back. It's nothing new. Or do we all forget the fact that the War of 1812 happened and they burned the White House to the ground? All right.
Well,
and that they backed the South in the Civil War. And Russia backed the Union. Yeah, I'm going to start doing the Bill Hicks thing back into the left. Right? I mean, come on. So the wrap up on this is that Klaus Schwab, as a figurehead for the old German British Crown colonial axis, because remember, the British Crown and the German aristocracy go way back. They're all interbred. It's all the same families. They want their colonies back. The French would be happy to go along with it now and everything else. They want their colonies back. And they're operating a script in order to discredit the United States, bring our institutions low, undermine the Constitution, undermine our legal system, our commercial code, all of it. Why do you think City of London and the British civil service were so dead set against Brexit? They were in the tank with Europe. The whole point of the European Union was to build the European Union up, bring the United States low, have the United States pay for the rebuilding of Britain and the rebuilding of Europe post World War II. But then they wanted to turn around and hollow out our manufacturing and everything else in the process. Like I could be as vicious about this as possible and give you a perfect narrative through line on all this. But it could have just been a whole bunch of shit that happened, right? That those incentives were always there because the people were there, manipulating events for their own personal benefit and their own personal bailiwicks for years. But then I look at why in the fuck was up until this year, why was U.S. debt, why was all debt issued in the United States indexed to LIBOR? And 17 of the 18 LIBOR banks are in Britain or in London. Why is our debt indexed to their bullshit? Why do we have to pay increased adjustable rate mortgages and car loans and credit card debt when British banks blow up or Italian banks blow up? Fuck them. That's not my problem. But it was. It was. And it was always the way to force the Fed to keep the Fed under a tight rein. And when the Fed was being run by globalists who worked for these same fucking people, Bernanke and Yellen, this shit accelerated post-2008. When the shadow banking system blew up and went global, we bailed everybody out. We bailed ourselves out. We bailed out Lehman Brothers. We bailed out, Bear Stearns. We did all that. But then the aftermath of that was the sovereign debt crisis of 2010, 2011, the Greek crisis of 2015. Guess who bailed them out? Us. Why? Bernanke and Yellen. Why? Bernanke and Yellen are fucking Davos. That's why. It doesn't get any more complicated than that. You put Jay Powell in office, who didn't go to Harvard, who actually traded bonds and actually, invested in private equity. Fucking Bernanke never made a free market move in his life. The guy's a pure fucking silver spoon in the mouth academic. Ivory tower academic, never traded a friggin' stock. Never had a real job. Never got his hands dirty. You think Ben Bernanke ever gripped a shovel in his fucking life? I mean, do you think he ever served fries? No. And so without that perspective, you're dealing with people who live in their heads with zero connection to their body, with zero connection to the rest of the world. They live in this intellectual friggin' left brain possessed gobbledygook of jargon and justification and, frankly, low self-esteem. They know they're full of shit, but they have unbelievable amounts of power, and they use it. I'm sorry. Janet Yellen is dumb. Listen to her speak. She's not smart. But then again, she was smart enough when she was on the Federal Reserve Board as the vice chair and just a Fed head. She was smart enough to outmaneuver Mr. Smarty Pants Alan Greenspan multiple times. And he was supposed to be the smartest guy to ever walk the face of the earth. Well, Greenspan was a moron too. It's not that tough. So now we have a Federal Reserve that actually, would actually like to, be the central bank of the United States. I mean, that's what they're signaling. And all the justifications for their actions are based in domestic policy. And for the first time since 2008, we don't have a Fed actually talking about worrying about climate change and worrying about this, worrying about Europe. Don't worry, we've got your back. None of this nonsense. So, and the key to understanding this was last June when Powell raised the reverse repo rate by 5 basis points over the Fed funds rate and drained $1.7 trillion in base money from the world. All that money came out of the Eurodollar markets. It all came out of Europe. It came off European bank balance sheets. They all of a sudden there was no virtuous credit cycle in Europe. The euro was trading at $1.25 in March of 2021. It was at $1.20. It hit a reaction high of $1.22 the day the Fed made this announcement, which was the same day that Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin to put off World War III for another 9 months. And that day, the euro dropped 3 cents. Put in a weekly bearish reversal and has never recovered since. And we're doing this on Sunday night. Tomorrow morning, the market is going to open with the euro at parity after the worst weekly close on the euro in almost 20 years? Because when it hit parity a few weeks ago, it didn't close anywhere near parity. It closed at over $1.01. On Friday, it closed at $1.03, 100.34, 34 pips above parity. It's going to go through that. It's going to print 99 cents. And when it prints 99 cents, as we move into the Italian elections, it's going to print 90 cents. Credit spreads between U.S. and European debt are going to collapse, if not, depending on where they are. German debts is more expensive than American debt, so that spread's going to collapse. Italian debt is finally 85 basis points above American debt. Italian debt's only trading 85 basis points or so above U.S. debt of the same maturity. What kind of fucking retarded world do we live in when Italian debt's 85 basis points over American debt? Okay? This is how fucking retarded this entire thing is. Italian debt should be 10 years should be 9%. If the U.S. 10 years is 2.9%. Right. Let's get a little risk back into this. So it's all nonsense. And so when we really do the math here, when we really talk about this, the Fed's raising interest rates, and the people who are going to get who are most vulnerable to this are the very people who put Joe Biden in power to destroy the United States. So I have to conclude that the Fed doesn't like these guys. And maybe it's because they want to do away with commercial banking as a concept. Right. I mean, this is a very simple story. Right. I mean, I just made it really complicated, but it reduces down to that. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I'd like to be wrong, but I don't think I am.
Right. Well, I like how, you throw out a hypothesis and we can test it. We could beat it up. We can look at it. We can see how it plays out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a scientist. Like, that's what you do.
Right. And I still want to understand a little bit more about all these players and some of the key events over the last 10 years. Sure. So it seems like the people at the table at this card game are China, Europe.
Yep.
But until this conversation or conversations like this with Phil, I really thought of Euro and the US and the West as one.
They're not.
So now let's break out Euro and the US. And when we say the US though,
and honestly, the UK is an independent factor,
right? And even in the US, there might be
yes, there are multiple factions within
the Euro faction, etc. But we'll just kind of carte blanche: the US, Euro, China, Russia.
Yep.
So what was Brexit? And I really want to get into what was Trump.
Well, they were reactions. They were populist reactions against this nonsense. Like, Brexit was what happened. Brexit and Trump are what happened when the people were finally able to express themselves and say, look, this is not what we want. We're going in the wrong direction. We don't want this. Brexit, the British people never wanted to be a part of the European Union. Okay? They never wanted it. Okay. And when they got it and they were in it for that long, they realized it was terrible and they wanted out. And Trump was the culmination of 8 years of building populism, starting with Ron Paul. From the moment that Ron Paul went after Rudy Giuliani in the early debate and ended Giuliani's political career on foreign policy that night, which every libertarian remembers, that was the beginning. And they couldn't, that genie couldn't be put back in the bottle. And, the silent majority started to speak, and we found out we're the majority. And we're much more than the majority in the United States. 65% of the United States does not want any of this. I'm dead serious when I say I can't believe anybody with 3 active brain cells to rub together and make a spark believes that election wasn't stolen.
Do you think Trump knew what he was running against, or just understood that he could seize a moment and there was a wave to be caught and he could catch the wave, maybe like another person might have been able to catch that wave? Or was there something about Trump as an individual? Does Trump know what he's doing?
He does now.
Did he know in the beginning?
He didn't then. He didn't then. What he knew was that there was something seriously wrong.
I
He
mean,
had an
anyone could have
idea
said
of
that.
how bad it was. He understood, I think, the Clinton Epstein dynamic. I think he understood all that stuff. But he didn't realize, he didn't know what he was doing, because if he knew what he was doing, he would have used the executive branch the way he could have. Like, he doesn't have Trump's 4 years in office were prima facie evidence the man did not know how the executive branch worked. If he understood how the executive branch worked, he would have ended all of this nonsense. He would have used the power of the executive branch to put Mitch McConnell in his place and to say, no, you're going to give me the Treasury Secretary I want. You're going to give me the Secretary of State and the National Security Director and everybody else. My cabinet is my cabinet. Fuck you, Mitch McConnell. You work for me now. I'm the head of the party. I'm the head of the government. We're shutting all this shit down, and we're not giving and we're not spending any of the money that you people have appropriated. You can go back to your districts and lose your asses. Had he actually done any of the shit, if you want to understand that, just look at the difference between Obama ability to utilize an executive order in the most tyrannical way imaginable and get away with it. Who do you think told Obama? You think Obama knew how to do that? No. Obama had all the help in the world because the entire state was working with him to achieve that. And they then turned all that bureaucracy against Trump. Trump should have just fired everybody at Foggy Bottom who refused to declassify freaking documents. He should have just woke up one day and said, you know what? If I don't get the Kennedy documents unredacted on my desk by 4:00, the entire 6th floor at Foggy Bottom is fired. Go home, and I'm putting you all on notice. You will be summarily executed as traitors. Done. You're going to jail for not doing what your fucking boss told you to do. You're fired, and then you're going to jail for contempt. Done. Now I'll have that on my desk by 4:00. Thank you very much. And had he done any of that, had he done it once, his presidency would have been completely different. Now today, do I think that he understands what the actual job is? Yes. Do I still want him in the White House? Absolutely not. He's too vulnerable. He's too old.
But let's go back to, I like the idea of just dissecting the idea of Trump. And so, I've spent my life as a corporate finance, a consultant, accounting consultant.
Sure.
If I got elected president of the United States tomorrow, I have some ideas. I've followed politics, but I would no fucking clue what I'm doing.
Right.
And I would probably have less confidence, and we need to fire this guy and that guy in the position of like, I don't know what we're doing here. And
Trump
I also wonder,
appease people.
And I also wonder, I mean, how many times, maybe you want to do whatever you're just kind of talking about there, and maybe you get a tap on the shoulder, and it's like,
of course,
from someone from the Davos crowd. They're like, if you keep going this way, we're going to. You can swim with the fishes.
Knew. Well, look, he knew what he was getting, and he knew who he was running against.
That's interesting. I mean,
that's the problem. He knew what he was running against. So it's like, was Donald Trump what he advertised himself to be? I don't think so. I think he proved to himself very early on that he was an appeaser. I think the Saker nailed him properly when, he betrayed Michael Flynn. Like during the transition, he wasn't even freaking president yet. And he already fucking threw Flynn under the bus and let Mike Pence roll him over. Like it was just dumb. But Trump's personality, this is why I don't want Trump anywhere near the White House. Okay. Because he doesn't have the right personality for this. You need a really obnoxious, disagreeable douchebag who goes in there and says, no. Last I checked, it's my name on the fucking desk. Now you work for me. And if you don't do what I ask you to do, or what I just told you to do, you will be fired. You will never get another job. And that's that. Now, at the same time, Davos turned around to everybody else and said, what did they say? If you go to work for him, you'll never get a job again in the rest of your life. Everybody was scared to death about what the repercussions of working for Trump meant for them. So, look, it's a big game of power politics. Was Trump an isolated, a king caught behind a castle, a bad castling move? If you want to use a chess metaphor, sure. But at the same time, There were many options available to him that he did not avail himself of, that he could have been more effective than he was. Now, that being said, he was tremendously effective in making them crazy, which outed them to the world. Remember what we said at the top of the show? They're most effective when they're electrons, and you haven't observed where the electrons are.
That's what I get when we talk about that. I think of like the Italian mob, and you think of someone like John Gotti. And some people say, he was the Don, he was the head of the mob at that particular time. And some people say, well, actually, maybe he was a figurehead, and the real Don was behind him somewhere.
Sure.
And that's a nice tactic to use so you can stay out of trouble. I wonder if someone like Klaus Schwab is more the figurehead than the real thing.
Whether he is or he isn't is irrelevant.
Doesn't matter, I guess.
I think it's irrelevant.
So,
he represents. Remember, Klaus Schwab, the WEF, they're a metaphor. They're a metaphor for, again, old colonial money.
Right. And that money that's been sitting in all these old Europe banks that they're zombie banks now, and they're keeping afloat through various means.
Right. And they use the Eurodollar, they use the offshore dollar markets to
and LIBOR and all these things to kind of manipulate. And everyone's got these different cards. So zooming out a bit, what I thought though, is I saw one puck being swung, from gold to the British pound to the dollar not backed by gold. Right. And I saw it all as being sort of a concerted effort. Everyone's kind of agreeing, even though there's individual factions. And then what we're going through now, maybe like the fourth turning, and I think, okay, now they got to reset the money. The money's broken. But you're saying they know the cap tables of the real world, of the real balance sheets in the world, and they no longer can make money off just monetizing this debt. And they've exhausted, sort of eking out $7 gas out of us and any way they could kind of cattle farm us. And I thought they were swinging the puck all the way to China. And they were going to give them sort of let China be the reserve currency of the world. This way they could export the yuan and the CBDC and have, get rid of the commercial banks. The Fed would go along because it's sort of everyone's in it together. So where does China?
But the Chinese said no.
Tell me more. Like what happened?
No, the Chinese clearly just said, you know what? No. We remember what you fucking people did to us. You gave us fucking heroin, you fucking British assholes.
I forget all these old.
Everybody forgets this shit. The Chinese and the Russians hate the fucking British. They hate these people because the British hate them. And the Indians hate the fucking British.
Do they hate us? Us not
being
they don't
hate us
Americans?
with the same. They don't hate us with the same.
Even though we're baby America,
because they know that so much of what we do is based on what they do and what they want us to do and what they can manipulate us into doing. Like, I heard something I can't believe I've never heard this before, but I only heard it for the first time a couple of weeks ago. Is that this the old joke from I think it's an Indian joke actually. They're talking about, they say the sun never sets on the British Empire. That's because God won't let these people loose in the dark. Okay. Like that's what we're dealing with. And I reserve just as much opprobrium for freaking Brits, for Germans as I do for the Brits at this point. And I'm Italian. Like they're fucking destroying my country. And the Italian aristocracy is no freaking better. They're just allowing, the true center of European culture to be destroyed.
It's very interesting.
Really, also, we want the Germans and the Brits to run the world so that nobody ever has decent food ever again. Like,
and really, think that they would have bounced back the least after World War II being beat up the hardest, especially the Germans being on the wrong side of that. And it is very sly and devious that they've been propped up.
When you stop to think about it, we rebuilt Germany.
Right.
And not
and why did
Italy.
we choose to do so? And you think about Operation Paperclip and the Marxism we're seeing now.
Yeah, you look at all this stuff. And who came up with Marxism? A German. And who was the most effective at spreading it around the world and exporting it and giving it to everybody else? Fucking Brits. British communism is the worst form of communism because it's communism that says that we were never commies.
Right. As one
I could do this all night. It's and it'll actually just make me sound like a fucking raving racist lunatic. But the reality is that it's these are. I'm not talking about British. I'm not talking about middle class British people. I'm not talking about people like Jeremy Clarkson and people honest middle class guys who've made good. They're like us. They're all fucked. They're all getting it from both ends. Like it's a German Scheisse porn video, for Christ's sake. And like we're all getting that. It's the aristocracy. It's the people who lied us in the World War I because of their stupid friggin' treaty system and their inbred and their inbred, treaties and their inbred royal families. And the same thing in World War II. And like there's very credible evidence that the old European money financed Hitler in order to throw him at the Russians. The whole purpose of Hitler was to create Hitler and throw him at the Russians to destroy the Russians, because the Brits have had a hard on to destroy Russia since the 1850s. Because Britain was in Afghanistan in the 1870s.
Right. Yeah,
because Watson comes back from the war in Afghanistan with a limp when he meets Holmes for the first time. The story, even Conan Doyle wrote the war, the malaise of the British Empire wove it into John Watson's character in Sherlock Holmes, and we all forget this. But it's very important. Came back from Afghanistan. It's right there. And that wasn't a Stephen Moffat thing for the recent BBC one with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, where he did literally come back from Afghanistan. No, it's like Watson came back from the war in Afghanistan, where Britain was fighting there then. And why would the British Empire be in Afghanistan if not to harass the Russian Empire? So This is old Halford Mackinder stuff. This is old British foreign policy stuff that goes back 150 years. The climate change and humanity as a virus thing comes out of the Club of Rome, which goes back to the 1850s and then winds up as with Julian Huxley and UNESCO and the United Nations and all this stuff. I mean, it's just been their policy. And it's just a bunch of, I hate to say it, it's just a bunch of old freaking stupid white guys. Arrogant old white guys who are entitled to think that they run the world.
Well, they are controlling countries, like little balance sheets and little pawns, and some of them control more than one country, it seems, or some groups control more than one country and can run little experiments on them and antagonize each other. So that let's zoom up a little bit to COVID,
right?
And how did we get to COVID? How did COVID change the game here?
I think when Powell came in 2018 and began raising rates, or 2017, and they began raising rates, and U.S. banks stopped taking European debt as repo collateral, right? Which is all late 2018, early 2019. The Fed raised interest rates all throughout 2018, and then they raised again in the early 2019. Then the ECB flaked out, and then the Fed had to pivot off the ECB in January 2019. We remember that? The Fed raises in December 2018. Everybody screams it was one rate hike too many, and then the ECB has to turn around and cut rates and put on new QE. 3 weeks later, 7 days later, the Fed stops and cuts rates, turns right around and goes from up 25 to down 25. Gave back the rate hike from December. Never in a million years have we seen the Fed react that quickly to anything. Well, why? Well, back then, still SOFR was in its infancy. LIBOR was still a thing, and the shadow banking system was freezing up because multiple major American banks refused to take European debt as repo collateral. So now all of a sudden, Europe didn't have any friggin' access to dollars. The Eurodollar market started to seize up, and dogs and cats living together. Monetary policy had to pivot, and Powell. I do believe that Powell ran interest rates up like that in order to start this process. And by the time we get to the SOFR blowout in 2019, which was, it was what it was. Like, we were going to have a recession in 2020. We were going to have another financial crisis in 2020. I remember writing back then going, look, this reminds me of 2007, 2008. We had a repo market blowout in September of 2007. The Fed comes in, steps in, stabilizes the market for 6 months. And then 6 months later, March of 2008, Bear Stearns blows up. 6 months after that, Lehman Brothers blows up, right? Like, the timeline was working itself out as the market goes predictably through various stages of the Kubler-Ross model of, grief, that good times are over, right? Fine. And we could see it. And I kept writing about it and telling everybody. And then COVID happens when? March 4th of 2020, right? So that's when the markets blow up. That's when Putin and Saudi Arabia have a disagreement over, cutting production from OPEC plus, and oil gets halved over a weekend. Now, that doesn't happen without coordinated effort on the part of very, very powerful players. Oil does not go from $80 a barrel to $40 overnight over the course of a weekend if it wasn't a coordinated hit. So they waited for that to occur, and they used the excuse of Putin to blame it on Putin and to start the process. I was like, yeah, no, Putin was absolutely right to do this because, hey, the Russians are the only ones that can survive at $40 a barrel oil. They don't give a shit. They pull it out of the ground for $9. They just don't care. Right. I had already understood the Russians' fortress balance sheet then. I'm like, oh, this is the guy. If I was Putin, I've been like, oh, yeah. And not only are we not cutting production, we're going to add another 300,000 barrels just to make sure that everybody's clear that where we stand. Just like every time I say Powell should raise, everybody thinks that Powell should raise 50 basis points. Nah, fuck it. Go 75. Nah, hey, Jerome, go 100. Let everybody know you're serious.
Right.
If they try to blackmail you, do it. So go through 2019. The big thing, the big story was the lack of the American banks being willing to take European debt as repo collateral. Now there's no dollars floating through the offshore dollar markets. Liquidity dries up. The bank sees dogs and cats living together. Balance sheets blow out. Bond spreads should blow out. The ECB has to step in. Oh my God, there we are. So what do you think? What do I think COVID was now? COVID was the ultimate Davos twofer. We're going to saddle Trump with a financial crisis. He is going to absolutely sign off on the worst piece of legislation in human history, the CARES Act, which will undermine his Federal Reserve trying to get control of U.S. monetary policy, which they had been doing steadily over the last 18 months. And then that forces the Fed to monetize, and double its balance sheet and monetize $7 trillion worth of debt and all the rest of it. As far as I'm concerned, that's blackmail. And then we can spend all of 2020 blaming Trump for how he handled COVID, while all of our planted Democratic governors turn into grandma killers by taking all your grandmas and putting them in nursing homes so that they all die of COVID. Oh, it's a threefer, because then you get rid of a bunch of old people that you don't have to pay their fucking Social Security and Medicaid for anymore. Because who's in charge of this policy? People who directly link back to the heads of the fucking Nazi Germany? I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, but I use these words in sentences. Like, this is fucking real, people. Like, this isn't hard when you stop to look at it. Like, Klaus Schwab, he's the grandson of a fucking Nazi general, for fuck's sake. These people, if you listen to them talk, the man has a bust of fucking Lenin on his wall, in his office behind his fucking microphone. I mean, read Piketty's book. Like, It's the Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st century. Guy's not even an economist. For whatever small value of that is worth in this world. But that's the model. That's the economic model. This schmuck friggin' German control freak wants to run the world on. Like, it's ludicrous. So as far as I'm concerned, COVID was in the end, COVID was a massive form of blackmail. Fed, Trump, us, all of it. You will give us complete control. We are going to implement vaccine passports, the whole surveillance state. We're going to do it all, and you're going to be happy or else. We even in March of 2021 put Mario Draghi, the former president of the ECB, in charge of Italy to make sure that Italy passes the COVID relief bills that the European Union spent all of 2020 wrangling over whether they would pass them or not, while they arm twisted everybody and threatened everybody's children behind the scenes. Like, we're now just into the assassination phase of the game. They went after Alexander Dugin yesterday. They killed Shinzo Abe a couple of months ago. They tried to kill Boris Johnson 2 or 3 times. Like, they're just now killing everybody. Like, if you don't go along with us, we're just going to shoot you in the street. I mean, we might as well be watching Schindler's List.
Right. Where does Ukraine fall into this? Well,
Ukraine's the perfect. It was supposed to be the perfect trap for Russia, because they really thought they were going to have the moral high ground to do a shock and awe campaign to destroy the Russian state, and then grind the Russian economy out between I'm going to crib now, the twin millstones of inflation and war fatigue. It's too bad that the Russians have a fortress balance sheet and someone who understands economics better than the people he's fighting against.
Yeah, what do you make of Putin? A couple of years ago, my understanding was, and I'm highly influenced by media and such, but that he was former KGB. He became mayor of St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. The way that was framed up to me is that was a port city, so it's sort of maybe a corrupt post. I'm just relaying what I heard.
Yeah, I know. I like
and sort of installed by the KGB and the old families to manage the transition and these kinds of things. Oh, so what is
Putin was handed off? Putin was handed off as one of the few people in Russia that was still a patriot in St. Petersburg. I've talked to people who dealt with Putin when he was a nobody bureaucrat, and he was the refreshingly honest guy.
I mean, is this a meritocracy? Like, did he?
No. What happened was it's actually the best. The person who has the best story on the Putin's ascension to power is Martin Armstrong, because Martin Armstrong was inherently involved in the attempt to frame Boris Yeltsin for stealing $7 billion worth of IMF aid to Russia. Yeltsin at the last minute understood that he was about to get fucking rolled.
Right.
And that Russia was going to be completely sold out to MI6 and the CIA and the New York banks, principally Bank of New York Mellon, and through Edmund Safra and Bill Browder and those guys. And he handed it off to Vladimir Putin because Putin was strong enough a character. I mean, Putin is not like some angelic figure. Obviously, he is the man you think he is, right? But he was strong enough to take the post and enough of a patriot to know how to operate the post and to bring Russia back from the brink. Now, he took over in incredibly dire circumstances. So those first couple of years, he did his best to kind of play ball and but internally within Russia, he was neutering the oligarchs. And within 3 years, he had done many, many things to earn him the eternal enmity of the old colonial European powers. Nationalization, the Yukos, blah, 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 the Khodorkovsky, all that shit. So Putin is a Russian patriot. Putin operates the Russian state on behalf of the Russian people. You don't have to like the way he does it. You don't have to like the way the Russian state is conceived. You can have all you can stick your fingers in your ears and be a good little anarcho-capitalist and go, they're all shit. Or you can live in the real world and realize that we still we may be reaching the end of the Bismarckian style nation state and hopefully not replace it with the transnational technocratic dystopian oligarch state, corporatocracy. That's what we're hoping for. But as long as the Bismarckian nation state is kind of the dominant paradigm of the day, you pick the one that best fits the people that you're ruling. And the way Putin rules Russia is the way the Russian people want to be ruled. Otherwise, he wouldn't have an 85% approval rating. So, therefore, what I think of Putin, I think he's a complicated figure. I think he's far more cynical in his use of power than even I want to believe sometimes. We all want to have put a heroic narrative on somebody because someone has to be the guy standing up to all this unbelievable fucking evil. And at the end of the day, I think Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve and the banks he represents are acting in their best interest, not in our best interest, in their best interest. I think Putin acts in his best interest for Russia, and at times, that's good for us. And if right now, you got Putin on one side, enforcing an energy crisis onto Europe, and you got Powell on the other side, enforcing a liquidity crisis on Europe, then those twin crises mean there is no future for Davos. There is no future for the European colonizers to take their money and go somewhere else. And, like the Nazis fled to Argentina, right, to try and set up the Third Reich, the Fourth Reich there in order to take over the world. Well, what did they do? What did these people do during World War II? They got all their money out of Europe during the European sovereign debt crisis of the early 1930s. Moved all into the United States, and then they funded the U.S. war machine, and they bought the U.S. involvement into World War II. And then they profited off of World War II on both sides to destroy the United States on the one side and the Russians on the other. And if the Germans were wiped out in the process, well, then we'll just rebuild them all and we'll just do it again. That's what we've been doing for the last 80 years. This shit history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. No, it fucking repeats when the same goddamn people are running the policy. So this time, the question is, are they going to be able to get their money out and then start the war and let everybody fight it out, and then they can move back into their ancestral homes? And like you said earlier, you thought they were going to move all their money to China, and then the Chinese the Chinese were then going to, no, the Chinese are like, fuck you. When George Soros literally says, quote, Xi Jinping is the devil and he needs to be removed from power. And he says this a week after Evergrande blows up and Xi shuts down shuts down all the foreign capital fleeing China. And then declares that, oh, well, as we restructure these property companies in China, as they go belly up, foreign investors are last in line to get paid, not first. George Soros was expecting to be able to go in with his money and buy the Chinese state via regulatory capture the same way that he buys influence in the United States and he buys influence in Europe. It doesn't work that way in Russia. It doesn't work that way in China. It doesn't work that way in Iran. It doesn't work that way in places where the state is where the oligarchy is subordinate to the state as opposed to the oligarchy being in charge of the state. We live in an oligarchy controls the state, regulatory capture, corporatocracy. They do not. Their civilizations are older than that. That means they can shift systems and still maintain the same. China is still China. Russia is still Russia. Iran is still Iran, because they have a multi-thousand-year history and identity that wraps itself around those concepts of Russia, China, Iran. Right? I had Joaquin Flores on my podcast at the beginning of the year to explain this. And right after I had him on right after I had Alistair Crook on my podcast to explain part of this as well. I really think people should go back and listen to those. I think it's episodes 100 and 101 or 101 and 102. We go into this for about 3 hours to have these guys explain the difference. It's why the sanctions didn't depose Putin. It's why people like Peter Zeihan and Kyle Bass and all these other fucking demographic obsessed douchebags are wrong. They literally are nothing more than George Freeman style Stratfor fucking CIA assets. It feeds neoconservative ideology to a T, because neocons are obsessed with playing the long game to destroy people at a societal level over the course of generations. They don't give a fuck how long it takes. We're eventually going to win. We don't care how many people we destroy as long as we win. It's very British. We're going to go, if it takes us 200 years to kill the Russians and it destroys the empire in the process, we're going to do it. Well, that's the way these people think. Well, okay, so we can't take over their government, and we can't put sanctions on them. We can't do that. We can put sanctions on them, but we can't do this. We can't do that. But we can slow them down until they have a demographic crisis, and then their welfare states will collapse their government. And that's what they think. And it's never worked that way, because I remember doing this when I was and this analysis, and I got news for you. I'm dead serious when I say that this analysis is fundamentally fucking wrong. And you want to know why it's wrong? Because Kyle Bass has been telling us that Japan is going to collapse under the demographic weight of its own aging population for how long now? Since I had hair. That's how fucking long. Well, got news for you. Back in 2011, when I was working with a broker over in Vietnam, and we were doing shit together, and I was learning more. I learned and have forgotten more about Southeast Asian small caps than any 40 people would ever learn in their lives. And I remember saying back in 2011, 2012, before Abe took power and we had the Senkaku Island dust up with China, said Japan is colonizing fucking Vietnam. Japan's not stupid. We have an old population and a lot of expertise in how to run companies. They've got a lot of young people that are smart, that want to build things and run and work in companies. Hey, how about we invest into Vietnam and we build all our shit in Vietnam? Okay, well, that solves the demographic crisis. You just colonized 30 million friggin' Vietnamese who are 25 to 35 years old. I think that's a win for Japan. That's why Japan never collapsed. Good news for you. When this shit is all over, the same guys that are screaming brain drain about Russia today because everybody was scared about what was going to happen in the first 4 months of the war, good news for you. A year from now, all those people who left and 500 and 5 times more than that are going to be flooding into Russia, because it's going to be the only place left in the world with a semblance of rule of law. Because the Russians are going to set up a competitor to the LBMA, the London Bullion Metals Association. They're going to have their own oil benchmark, their own gold benchmark, they're going to build financial markets that are going to be the envy of the friggin' world, because they're going to just build it all on gold. And a strong national defense and a sovereigntist-minded government, which is why, of course, NATO is desperate to figure out a way to goad the Russians into an Article 5 scenario so that they can attack them and start World War III. So that's why the Ukrainians are bombing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's why MI6 is pulling off sabotage operations in Crimea. That's why they killed Alexander Dugin's daughter. They're trying to get the Russians angry to escalate from a special military operation to a full-scale mobilization against Ukraine. At that point, then if any, all we need is just one little thing to cross. We need some 545 by 45 Russian to like cross somebody to spray some fire across the Hungarian border, and all of a sudden we can bring all of NATO in. Not that they're not already there in the first place, but now we can virtue signal to the high heavens that somebody got shot on the Hungarian side of the border. And then this is how dumb it is. Like, and the worst part about it, Cedric, is that, it wouldn't be so bad if these people weren't so unbelievably fucking lame. Like, they really are just dumb and lame.
Well, they, as dumb and lame as they are, and that some of us can see through it, they have some really big tools on their side.
They do.
Huge incentives. And I really loved your example around the electrons and observability, and sort of once you observe, and I get what you're saying, but they got massive powers, powers of deception, around monetary colonialism, monetary economics, monetary policy. But back to sort of physics, real physical infrastructure. How strong is the Russian army? What kind of army are we talking about? You always, because
the Russians have only mobilized about 15% of their armed forces.
But they're the only armed forces actually practicing in real theater.
I don't see the Russians are not interested in taking over Europe.
But do they have a military where does their military rank in the world? Are they a real force?
Yes, they are. Are they a real defensive force? Yes. You got to remember the problem with the problem with the Russian army is that, and the way you look at it vis-a-vis Ukraine, is that Ukraine is fucking enormous. It's hard to picture how big Ukraine really is, but when you overlay Ukraine on a map, I think of the United States, you get something like Odessa is Dallas, and Mariupol is Jacksonville, and Kharkov is like Nashville.
Right.
It's big. Okay, it's big. It's not a small country. So when you look at the map and you see how much the Russians have taken and how much they haven't taken and how much they haven't moved, blah, 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 you ask yourself, okay, so what are they going to do next? Well, like I've said from the beginning, I said, the Russians will take a long-term approach to this, and they will use economic warfare and attrition in energy exports, energy, food, strategic metals, blah, 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 base commodities that the world needs to actually then implement sanctions that they won't, sell. They won't sell the Russians back their own gas turbines and, airplane wings and, fuselages and all the rest of that stuff. Right. So they'll have to develop that shit themselves, and they'll get that. They're going to get that technology from China, as far as I'm concerned, or the Indians will build it for them, one or the other. And then we'll get to see what happens, which is what I thought would happen, which is that the rest of the world outside of the West would turn around and go, you know what? Yeah, we side with the Russians. We're just not allowed to say it. We think they're right. We're done. We're done with being colonized by you people. We just are. We're done. India's done. Pakistan. Well, right. Pakistan's not being allowed to. Pakistan is done, but Pakistan isn't being allowed. They're going to arrest Imran Khan for campaigning. It's freaking ridiculous. Like we're now MI6 and the CIA. The way they're operating in Pakistan is transparently evil at this point. And I've been long guillotines and rope makers for a long time now. Nowhere is that going to be more true than in Pakistan. So watch that carefully. And Italy, but they got rid of Mario Draghi without it. So they only had to threaten him with the guillotine, and that little fucker turned tail and ran. So they have a lot of power, but power wielded for a long time makes you stupid. They have a sledgehammer. Everything's to be pounded with a sledgehammer. There's no scalpels left. They're not using scalpels. So they think kick the Russians out of the SWIFT system, seize their foreign exchange assets, not thinking, oh my God, that will scare everybody into going along with it. And what happened? The Russians survived it, and everybody went, holy shit, they did that to the Russians. I don't want to. And they thought the response would be, oh, if they can do it to the Russians, they can definitely do it to me. And everybody would run screaming for the hills. And what happened? They all went, well, shit, we better stop using the dollar.
Yeah.
And Putin has been prepping them for 8 years,
right,
diplomatically, saying they're going to do this to us. When it happens, watch what's going to happen. This is how we're going to respond. And this is what's going to happen next. And I could see it coming a mile away. And Xi went to Saudi Arabia this week. First time he's left China in 3 years since COVID started, which says two things. One, it says that he's not worried about being assassinated, just like they're both going to be at the G20, and the U.S. is apoplectic. 6 months ago, I was arguing with my partner in the newsletter, Dexter White. He said Putin will never be able to leave Russia ever again. I'm like, that'll last 6 months. He's like, no, it won't. I'm like, it'll last 6 months. And 6 months, lo and behold, 6 to 7 months later, he'll be at the G20 next month. And it's going to be hilarious. Xi goes to Saudi Arabia. You think they were discussing the finer points of Go strategy or chess? No. They were talking about the Saudis selling oil to the Chinese in something other than the dollar, ending the so-called petrodollar system. Now, the petrodollar system has, for all intents and purposes, been dying a death of 1,000 cuts for about 10 years now. But what I've been saying, and I was on with Francis Hunt a couple of weeks ago, and we got to talking about Saudi Arabia, and I said, Francis, the smartest thing for MBS to do right now, Mohammed bin Salman to do right now, is to kill the peg of the real to the dollar now when oil is $95 a barrel. Don't wait until Davos, bombs the price back into the 50s, and then you're burning billions of dollars trying to maintain the peg. Don't do it under duress. Don't do it on their terms. Do it on your terms. Really show everybody how strong you actually are. We're going to break the peg now, and there's nothing the United States can do about it. And when that happens, not much is going to happen at this point. But again, another reason why I think the Federal Reserve has to raise interest rates. They have to sop up overseas liquidity. The foreign demand for the dollar is beginning to fail. And that means that Congress can't spend money like they used to. I was just watching Danielle DiMartino Booth on Kiko. She was on, I was on earlier in the week, and she was on a couple of days after me. And she made she was asked about the stimulus package, about the latest infrastructure bill. And she said, it's this kind of classic stimulus where, oh, well, you'll get an incentive to buy a solar panel. We'll set money aside for that. But what if people don't buy solar panels? It's not stimulative like UBI giving people $1,200 checks. It's not the same thing. So it's old school, as she put it, old school stimulus, which isn't necessarily, a money velocity thing. It's not transmittable, right? And so it's not going to create an uptick in immediate uptick in transmission of monetary policy. Right. Which also means that if people are too poor to buy solar panels or electric cars in the first place, because the savings rate is cratered to below 5%, then maybe this bill isn't ever, we're never going to even, this bill is going to die with money set aside but unspent. Which is, again, another win for the Fed, which says, yeah, you can't even get this kind of spending through. Right? Because you can't even spend that money now. And then eventually the guts of this bill will be repealed, and those things will just be pulled off the market, and all those subsidies will just will sunset, and the whole thing will just go unspent. Again, fiscal, the Fed gets blamed for everything. Martin Armstrong makes this point, and he's absolutely right about it, that, the Fed gets blamed for everything by the Austrians and the gold bugs, but they're wrong when it's, when the Congress is the one spending the money and forcing the Fed's hand. We've had a Congress that has worked for foreign powers. We had a Federal Reserve that would work for foreign powers. Now we have a Federal Reserve that doesn't work for foreign powers. And we're soon to have a Congress that will work, where fewer of them will work for foreign powers. Will it be enough to slow the insanity out of Washington? Well, considering that so many of those people who think they work for foreign powers actually work for Wall Street, because they can't get reelected without Wall Street. And if Wall Street said, oh, by the way, no, I'm still trying to figure out how Build Back Better didn't get passed. How does Manchin and Sinema stand up to that without someone very, very powerful standing behind them and going, oh, no, you say no. Don't you worry. You say no. How does Mario Draghi get taken down in Italy if someone very powerful doesn't say, fuck Davos, you work for me now? Giuseppe Conte, head of 5-star, and you take that asshole down because we're coming for them. When I look and I see that, this is all I can see. So I don't know. I'm happy to be wrong about it all, but you know, when it comes to big shit like this, I've been batting 1,000 for too long now.
Right.
I'm you know, I'm one day I'm going to be wrong on this. But when I hear Daniel DiMartino Booth basically saying, oh no, the Fed's going to 6%, folks, because the Fed can go to 6%. Buckle up, Buttercup.
So, yeah, you know, in terms of all these players, though, at the table, zooming out a bit, do the corporations work for the government, or do the corporations control a well-meaning government?
Oh, it's definitely a symbiotic relationship. It's a little bit of both. And but you know, I don't want, I can't be like too Canadian lefty about this. Like every lefty Canadian every sci-fi, cheap sci-fi show out of Canada always has, you know, it's all anti-corporate OWS inspired, you know, analysis or dystopian futures. I'm not saying they're completely wrong. They're not, but I happen to like a lot of them. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I think it's just a little bit more nuanced than that. That's all. Yeah.
I'm not anti-corporate, but sure. I wonder whether corporations will usurp government power down the road.
Well, that's what that's definitely what Davos is planning for us. They want to, they want that. That's what when George Soros says open society, that's what he means. He means, you know, corporate control of the flow of capital.
So I wanted to turn to this topic in the sense that when I saw Facebook roll out their attempt to roll out Libra, and I felt like you, where I was like, I called it right away. I think that they made a huge mistake trying to come out with something that would compete in any shape or form with the US dollar.
Yeah.
I thought if they came out with a US dollar on Facebook, that not only would they, in the short term, then sort of embed themselves with the U.S. government and help the U.S. government export the U.S. dollar and colonize other territories, and then they could down the road
they tried
make it a 99% U.S. dollar.
They tried doing it during the Trump administration when Goldman Sachs was in charge of the White House, and Goldman was actively trying to slow down Davos's plans for using Ripple as the replacement for SWIFT.
So this is what I want to get into, where we could talk about Ripple, ETH, whatever, but like it seems to me, well, ETH is the same. I want to bring up 2 points here. One, again, I go back to before this conversation, I'm thinking, okay, they want to swing the puck to, not necessarily, I wasn't thinking in complete terms of they want to store their value in China, but they want China to be the currency of the world. Whether that's reserve currency or not, but so that they can have that CBDC and have that sort of financial surveillance and social credit score. However, I understand that sort of competes with sort of commercial banks in the US.
Without a doubt.
Right. And so now, though, but from reading your writings a little bit and listening to you, it seems like the US might still turn to, and I say crypto, I separate that from Bitcoin, but in terms of crypto, the U.S. might turn to crypto in the sense that, you know, it's fintech. It's a way to sell a product. They can make some money.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Yeah.
But at the same time, when I think of the world or the West turning to crypto, I think of ETH and that being a JP Morgan pre-mine and financial surveillance,
right,
and centralized control. So what do you think about sort of the future of now, we could stipulate, I think the dollar is already digital. So I'm not saying that it's not digitized, but
yeah, but it's not a
direct from the
Fed, not a
database.
It's not a secure database
by the Fed, direct to the consumer. Because the Fed's database is one of the most secure in the world. I mean, Bank of America gets hacked, but the Fed doesn't, generally speaking, get hacked ever. So what do you think of then with the future of, when I say crypto here, I'm not getting into cryptographic currency and whether it's decentralized and censorable, but just the US, China, Euro, and what they're all trying
I think Wall Street, I think the original point was that zero bound interest rates destroyed the commercial banks' basic business, net interest margin, right? That business is gone, right? It shouldn't have to be gone, but it is, because we have fictitious risk assessment mechanisms, right? We don't have real interest rates. We don't have any means by which to properly manage and assess risk, and therefore we can't price risk, and therefore we can't have yield curves. We can't have we can't do any of the shit that y'all went to freaking business school to do, right?
True.
So in that world, I think the sale to Wall Street on the part of the crowd was, look, you can have your playground where you can fleece the Muppets through crypto,
right,
by replacing the old system with Ethereum. So you can get back your 3 to 5%, brokers fees, and your 3 to 5% currency transaction fees, and all this shit. Meanwhile, in proof of work land, we're going, yeah, no. Like, we can make another proof of work coin with, unbelievably cheap transaction fees and a, 5-year-old blockchain that nobody's using. You can take the Litecoin blockchain and move a lot of Bitcoin transactions off of that. You don't even need fucking Lightning Network. This pisses me off about Bitcoin maxis. I hate to tell you this, but I would so much rather have 7 or 8 other good proof of work coins out there just running around doing that job, because they're truly decentralized still, because they're still a proof of work blockchain, whereas Lightning Network isn't. It's still pools of liquidity and centralization, and somebody owns it, and someone's getting a VIG, and blah 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 blah. I'm just like, Lightning bothers me at a fundamental level. As an OG Bitcoin guy, fucking Lightning Network is not. I would much rather see. I'd rather see fucking Pirate Chain, or I don't even give a fuck if it was pre-mined or not. I don't give a fuck. What I care about is that, give me a good proof of work coin that with settlement that will get me in and out of the fucking convenience store, so I can buy a pack of fucking cheap cigars and a fifth of whiskey and go home inside of 10 minutes, where I'm not paying some guy, where I'm not recreating the old system. Okay, we don't need to do that. There's no reason why we can't have 14 or 15 other shit coins running around doing this. This is, if Bitcoin maxis really thought about what it is that they advocate, what the world they want, they would stop doing the Bitcoin maxi thing and start really thinking about this. And I know this is heresy to modern Bitcoin maxis, like, who've spent way too much time getting religion about this. I'm not religious about any of this shit. I'm not religious about gold, not religious about Bitcoin, I'm not religious about any of this crap. At the end of the day, I know that every technology becomes obsolete given enough time, because the law of diminishing marginal utility tells me that is correct. And if you don't believe in the law of diminishing marginal utility, then you're a monetary crank. And I don't care who you are. I don't care. You're wrong. Because, and moreover, even if you're right, you don't know you're right. We've never seen Bitcoin operate. I've said this before. We've never seen Bitcoin operate in a world where the central banks don't exist. I think that the Bitcoin and this stuff is putting pressure tremendously on the old system. I think in reality, Bitcoin is the only thing they really are worried about at this point. And they're worried about it because at some point they're going to have to adopt it as a reserve asset in order to survive. Like I've been saying for a while now, what will bake your noodle is the day the Federal Reserve needs a higher gold price. And that day's out there and it looms. We know, I've explained why in the past, why the ECB needs a higher gold price, because the ECB has no ability to create elastic money. It can go bankrupt. It keeps its gold on its balance sheet at par. And that's why with the Fed raising interest rates and rates on European debt falling, rising, that means that the value of the bond portfolio is falling, and therefore they need a higher gold price in order to offset a falling bond portfolio. And that's why Basel III and all the changes to the way the gold market is to operate. And that's why JP Morgan was finally convicted in a court of law this week on manipulating gold prices. And well, can't we not see the fucking setup? And JP Morgan turns around this week and bombs the price of gold on Thursday and Friday by $50, just to remind everybody that no matter what that you can convict us in a court of law in Illinois, but we still control the Southern District of New York. Go fuck yourself. Oh, by the way. Well played, Jamie Dimon. So I'm sorry, dude. It is like, you know, don't hate the play. I hate the game. Like it's not, you know, right. So when it comes to this stuff, I really think that what they were trying to bribe the old banking system with was, well, there's still going to be a place for you at the table. You can fleece them through ETH or whatever other systems you want to put together, and we can do this stuff. Jamie Dimon likes to say, I don't like Bitcoin, but I love blockchain. Well, what the fuck does that mean, dude? Like, give me a break. Like, Bitcoin is the blockchain. The blockchain as technology is not particularly good technology. Actually, it's pretty crappy technology for anything other than doing what Bitcoin currently does. Distributed encrypted databases are better. They are. Blockchains do one particular thing really fucking well, which is to stop counterfeiting. Oops. Which is your entire business model, which is why you hate it.
Wow.
All right. So, but again, doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It could be any other coin. We can make a new Bitcoin. We can make a new Bitcoin tomorrow because we validated the technology. But are the parameters of Bitcoin really the parameters we want to base our monetary system on? Maybe as a reserve asset, but not as a medium of exchange. That's why we need a Lightning Network. When we're better off just making coins that are proof of work coins that have better medium of exchange characteristics, shorter block times, larger block sizes, blah, 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 blah. And send audit blocks back to the Bitcoin blockchain to validate that smaller blockchain. And you don't even need to spend all that power. Just run the audit blocks and back the system up every 3 minutes, 10 minutes, every 10 minutes, and every Bitcoin, every hour. You send. Komodo was doing this shit, 5 years ago. They were sending audit blocks back to the Bitcoin blockchain in order to validate the Komodo network. Now you have a two-factor authentication. Now you have a real two-factor authentication system. Like, blockchains can talk to each other and do shit and create a neural network of security that the banks could never, ever, ever, ever conceive of in their entire fucking lives. And it can all be private. Most of them can be above board to go along with the crazies who are in power who still have guns. Okay, fine. Well, there's my transactions. They're above board. Oh, well, what about that one that went into R and then came out the other side? Well, fuck you. You don't get to see that. Because last I checked, no one's figured out how much R anybody's got. Or hell, Monero's privacy stuff up until I guess the classic ring signature stuff wasn't even very good, and they still couldn't and the government couldn't figure out how much Monero, the guy at Silk Road, had when they got him in 2017. And Monero's come on, Monero's difficulty is nothing back then, and they still couldn't figure it out, right? So to obfuscate and create privacy within crypto is really quite easy, especially with a higher total addressable market. All the the privacy schemes go up exponentially in effectiveness with the greater than number of transactions that are and the number of accounts that go through a particular at any particular that are mixed at any particular time, right? So like all of this stuff is this is math, and the math is immutable, and it's easy, and it's fun, and it's good, and it'll work in our advantage 10 years from now after all these people have left the scene.
Right.
And we're all securing all of our physical gold with freaking with hard proof of work blockchain assets, and we have the best monetary system the world could ever conceive of until we come up with something better.
Right.
But between now and then, the banks were sold. I think Wall Street was originally sold on this idea that this was going to be their business, and then they were going to just take the rest of their business away from them. And they're like, but we don't have. Why do we have to live like that? Why can't we have that and this? Why can't we have our old business back and our old credibility back, and do this as our side hustle? Because we're going to move in that direction anyway. Because we can't stop the Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russians and the Chinese refuse to get on board. The big thing here is that the reason why we're in this position today is because the Russians and the Chinese basically said, no, we refuse to be colonized. And without Russia and China, they can't make this work. The Russians provide too much of the world's base commodities, too many of the world's base commodities. They're too strategically important from that perspective. And the Chinese, it's a powerhouse. It may be, it may be a Keynesian house of cards, but is it any worse or more sclerotic than what we're dealing with in Europe or the United States? It's what gets me angry about people like Kyle Bass and Peter Zeihan and all these other guys. They go on and on and on about how, well, they've been saying that China's a friggin', paper tiger for 15 years now. I'm like, guys, I got news for you. You're wrong. I'm not saying that the Chinese haven't built an unbelievable house of cards. They have. I'm still an Austrian economist. I'm still a libertarian. I still get this shit. I got news for you. Have you looked at Europe? Mm-hmm. In the great game of global capital, you don't have to be good by any objective measure. You just have to be better than everybody else. And if everybody else sucks, you just have to suck a little less. It's like you don't have to be the fastest guy there. You just have to be faster than the bear. In this case, you have to be the guy who treats capital flows to where it's treated best. So eventually, if Bitcoin and the crypto guys stay on mission, capital will flow to where it's treated best. So treat your capital best within Bitcoin, within crypto properly, and it will eventually move there. And the crypto guys really got to make peace with the gold guys and realize that gold still acts as the transition psychologically from the old world to the new world. And we always want a tangible asset psychologically to undergird everything, and something that tangibly tokenizes our opportunity costs. It's very, very important. This is not to say that there's anything wrong with Bitcoin from that perspective, but it is a matter of perspective. And maybe 2 generations from now, we'll be able to let that crutch go. But I'm not gonna be around to see it, so I don't give a shit.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like we are on that sort of, we teeter between whether it's going to take 0, 1, or 2 generations to go from that tangible to that intangible. I'm sort of, I have that zealot mindset where I'm ready.
I was ready in 2010 the minute I saw it. But I just want everybody to, don't get me wrong. I
like your non-religious viewpoint on it, or the way you're able to come at it very secular, because, it being a zealot about it kind of makes you beholden, or kind of consumes you in a way that maybe you can be blindsided or be emotionally reacting to things.
Well, it's like everything else. Watch what's happening with the SJWs and the quote unquote woke progressive left. You can see that and you go, those people are crazy, right? It's easy, right? Well, I got news for you. Every non-Bitcoiner is looking at the Bitcoin maxis going, you're crazy. Just the same way that people used to look at me and go, people used to look at me and go, dude, you're crazy about gold. You don't get it. I'm like, and here's the gig. They were right.
Right.
because
up a lot of questions.
it becomes a purity spiral, and purity spirals, and I see it with objectivists, quoting Ayn Rand back at me. I'm like, dude, seriously, like you haven't like grown up in fucking 30 years. Like what?
Right.
I mean, yeah, Rand was right about a great many things, but she wasn't right about everything.
Right.
Like,
no. I want to read from your work.
Sorry.
This appeared in Bitcoin. No. I'm sorry to cut you off, actually.
No, go ahead.
This appeared in Bitcoin Magazine. You published there. One of, I think, 3 articles you have over there. And I think this is an important point. Quote, it means relinking global liquidity and the value of money with the real costs associated with building real wealth. I don't think Bitcoin fears the Fed because Bitcoin is just code. Bitcoiners, on the other hand, who are tied to the price and not just stacking sats, need to realize the immense power that the Fed still has. And when faced with an existential threat to its future, the lengths it will go to preserve itself and those banks whose interests it represents. Once you accept this, only then can you see the immense opportunity in front of you to make the right decisions at the right times and navigate your way through this pivotal period of history.
Mm-hmm.
I love that passage because it really does remind me of sort of this, you have to have a lot of humility in the face of these tremendous headwinds and these incredible forces that are, as we've outlined, just at a very high level over centuries. I feel we're at the beginning of a new 5,000-year turn in the sense of this technology like fire or the printing press or the internet. And I think what makes it, what I have hope for and makes me very optimistic is that it can happen quicker than expected, is that it's built on exponential technology like the internet. So, things keep speeding up, but at the same time.
And I'll tell you, man, I hope, and if you're right, you're right. I think it would be great.
Well, I'm bearing out to be wrong.
Well, the thing is,
taking a while.
The thing is that, look, I built I bought a piece of property in late 2002 and built a house in 2003, expecting the United States to have fallen as a society by 2010.
Right.
And then I went back and rewatched The Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford, where he uproots his family, moves them to the jungles, and tries to make society in the jungle and brings ice. Go watch The Mosquito Coast again, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. The great book by Paul Theroux. It's an unbelievable book. It's a decent movie. It's a great book. But yeah, no, this is the thing, and things happen on their timeline, not yours, and just you can get everything right, and if your timing in the markets is wrong, you still lose everything. Okay, so you can't get back your time. Use your time appropriately. If you love Bitcoin, stack sats and shut up about it. Go build a business. Go raise some children. Shut the fuck up. You got your Trezor. You got your Ledger. Whatever it is. You got your cold wallet. Dip in every once in a while, buy some more. Shut the fuck up. And move on. Because it's not important. Leave us out of it. People know what Bitcoin is now. We don't need we're out of the proselytizing phase. Same thing with people know what libertarians are. Now it's such a tarnished brand. People are wanting to call themselves post-libertarian. When it's all these great ideas that have created these opportunities that are in front of us right now. All this anarcho-capitalist praxeological shit that, that the Keynesians and the Marxists and the Aristotelians and all of them have told us we're all full of shit about. They yelled at us for years about it. I still get that they still argue with me today. Like some of my very best friends, they still tell me I'm full of shit. I'm like, that's funny. Why am I right more often than you are? Why do I hear my words coming out of your mouth back to me 5 years from now without an apology? Right. So, I mean, like it is what it is. Like the decentralized world is the right frame intellectually, philosophically that you want to achieve. And you achieve that here first and out in the real world after that. Once you get it here, they can't take it from you. It's that moment in V for Vendetta when, okay, I'm ready to die. And she's like, okay, you're free to go. Right. When he's doing he's got her in jail, right? That whole sequence. Exactly right. Like once you're done, once you transcend that and you're out of it and you've opted out in every way, now you just make your peace with where you have to compromise in order to get through your life, because your life is still more important than your principles. Because your principles you hold in here. You act them out in the real world as to the best of your ability. And the world is always going to make you a hypocrite. Nothing you can do about that, dude. If you're going to live, you're going to be a hypocrite. You're going to pay your taxes. You can know that taxes are theft, and you can scream to the high heavens that taxes are theft. But until you're Wesley Snipes and you go to jail for not paying your goddamn taxes, got news for you. You're going to jail like Wesley Snipes, and your life is your life. And then you're stuck doing shitty movies for the rest of your life, as opposed to being as opposed to living your best life. Like this is and having the opportunity to be an example of how to navigate the real world as an adult and interact with it as an adult. And it's just, and I think that's, if there's one thing that I try to do in all of this, while I'm belittling the people that I think are they're the worst people imaginable, I call them the most adolescently nasty freaking names I can come up with, but I still want to treat the situation as a nuanced adult look at how the world actually operates. I used to say all the time, I don't analyze the world the way I want it. I analyze the world I've got. Okay. I know what the world I want is, but this is the world I got. Now, how do I get through this? How do I, and I can't deny the fact that the Fed has power. I can't deny the fact that Davos has power. I can only think about ways in which they're going to use it. And then sometimes hopefully they'll use it against each other. And the worst one will lose. Mr. Anarcho-capitalist himself, Murray Rothbard, used to vote. You look at the two candidates and you go, that guy's slightly better for me. I'm voting for him. He's going to steal a little less of my money than that. The very pragmatic way to go through the world. Didn't change his principles at all. Only those wanting to go down the religious path or the purity spiral path to say, well, I don't vote because it's morally wrong. Okay, that's fine. I don't disagree I don't think you shouldn't do that. I did that for a long time. I still do. I only vote when it's really, for a person, I only vote when it's really important. Otherwise, I just show up to vote against all the constitutional amendments that raise my taxes and then go home, and against all the judges because they all suck, and I go home. That's it, right? I don't like to vote. I don't like to vote because I don't like to encourage them. Is the way I kind of like to look at it, right? So yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, that's where we have to land on this. Is just stay away from purity spirals. Do your thing. Live your life. Your kids are far more important than your Bitcoin stash. Than proselytizing for one more guy on the internet as to why he's wrong, that he's not a Bitcoin maxi. That's just dumb. It's a waste of time.
I hear you.
Doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong.
It doesn't matter. It's an interesting point you make and viewpoint. And I think it's about being grounded and not looking at these things as more than tools, because they just are tools. At the same time, though, I ask you my final question in the sense of when I found Bitcoin, to tee up on your point of, yeah, like it's not going to maybe change my external world. Maybe not overnight. That's not the point.
No, it's not.
But I did feel it changed my internal world.
Good.
So in the sense of, okay, I can store my value in this thing, whether through speculation or as investment properties, or, this thing increases my worth. Regardless, I get a peace of mind by putting my value and my hard work into this thing, whether it works out for me economically or not. And that gave me, it felt like a new power, like becoming like a black belt. So now I'm a black belt. I don't want to get into a bar fight. No. I don't want to run into the unknown, But I want to know that if someone picks a fight with me, that I can probabilistically maybe handle myself. Now, I don't ever know who's going to pick a fight with me. Maybe they are still going to kick my ass, but I'm going to be a better chance of defending myself, having, studied this art and not going out maybe to pick fights over it, but having this tool.
Yeah.
So I asked.
It's about preparation.
Right. It's about preparation, about internal balance,
yes.
fortitude, and being content with being wrong. Like, sure. Okay, I could try to make the best choice, and if it doesn't work out for me, I went in making the best decision I possibly could based on the best information I could acquire and obtain. Right. And good choices usually lead to good outcomes, but it's not a guarantee.
No, it's not a guarantee.
But that is like a superpower that I found this new thing that I could kind of deal with and interact with that I couldn't before.
This is the way I felt the day. This is the way I felt the day I finally grokked. I grokked praxeology. I had a superpower in my hand. I had a way to look at the world that didn't drive me completely insane. I'm like, oh, that's the way the world works. Cool. Now I can fucking deal with the world. And Bitcoin was an extension of that. Gold was an extension of that. All of these things were an extension of those things. That's why it's called gold, goats, and guns. These are all metaphors.
Well, I would have named it Bitcoin, guns and goats, maybe.
Bitcoin bulls and.
So my final question to you is:
and bazookas, but that's fine.
Has Bitcoin changed you in any way?
Yeah.
It? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I looked at Bitcoin when I first read the white paper back in 2010. I went, oh, cool, somebody did it. Because I was theorizing about an unhackable currency. And then what I was going to do then, like I told you, I always wanted to be a writer. What I was going to do back then, which I wound up not doing, and I still have notes for it, so maybe I'll do it. I always said, wouldn't it be great as a communicator to communicate what an Austrian business cycle would look like over a long term if someone had hacked the unhackable currency that led to humanity colonizing, the galaxy. So doing like a foundation style braided series of short stories to tell this future history around the hacked, unhackable currency that undermined the society through stealth inflation over the course of a few generations. That's what I was going to do. But I had to come up with the mechanisms for the currency. And I got like in the weeds with Americium 235 decay and all sorts of weird stuff. And then I read the Bitcoin white paper and I went, they did it. So now the question, and now we all know how you hack the unhackable currency. You control the backdoors to the encryption algorithm that's used to hold the currency. That's the easiest mechanism. I'm not saying that there's a backdoor in the SHA-256. I'm not one of those guys. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this is no longer like a difficult task. And now it's no longer even really a very interesting story, which is why I haven't written it. So, but at the time it fascinated. And so, yeah, when I read the Bitcoin white paper, it took all the wind out of my sails in wanting to write that story. Because I'm like, oh, we've got one now. Now what do I do? I can't use this because that would be dumb. So but it is what it is. So, but I've been thinking about this stuff in these terms for a long time. So Bitcoin, in so many ways, changed the way I look at it. Is validated for me the idea that when you put a system under enough stress, catastrophic in the mathematical sense, mutations occur. And all of a sudden, we have a great leap forward in technology. And in this case, money is technology. Mm-hmm. And therefore, and I saw it then. And I just didn't have the convictions that the market would see it that way. Otherwise, you and I would be talking because I would be on a private island. Because I had 250 Bitcoins at one point, 250 Bitcoins at one point. So, it is what it is. I don't, I saw something the other day that said, if I could go back, if I if I had bought Bitcoin in July in 2010 for $1 a piece or 2011 for $1 a piece, yeah, I'd have sold them at for $100 a piece in 2013. I'm like, yeah, it was me.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, 100 bagger on this shit. What are you kidding me?
Yep. That makes total sense, especially, in traditionally legacy finance framework. I get it. Tom, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. I got a million more questions for you. I'd love to have you back anytime soon. We can't cover it all in one show.
No, you can't.
But brilliant stuff. I love hearing you talk. I'll leave it to you for any parting words and let people know where they can find you and your work.
I appreciate it, Cedric. And yeah, I had a blast, dude. Thank you for the invite, as always. I love going on new shows. I'll say this all the time. I'll do anybody's show once. Like, why not? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Well, in this case, it was a lot of fun. So there you go. You can find my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. There you'll find links to the podcast, which is syndicated everywhere. So you can get the RSS feed off of any of the posts there. You can sign up for the Patreon, Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns, where we have a monthly newsletter, and I also do private blog posts and private podcasts with chart reads and market reports that come out on every Wednesday and Sunday. That's all unique material for my patrons, and I take care of them between 4 and 5 times a week, depending on how I feel. So on top of everything else, and this is part of the reason why I don't write as much publicly as I used to. I just don't have the bandwidth anymore. And I also still write for Newsmax on a regular basis as well. And that's where you can find me. Find me on Twitter at TFL1728, where I tear it up on a regular basis and try to get banned, and it never seems to work. Like, I'm so good at so many things. Why can't I get banned off of Twitter?
Someday failure. Thank you, Tom. This has been incredible.
Thank you. Have a good night, Cedric. We'll talk to you soon.